Imagine waking up, just, trying to pull yourself out of the dark.
Yeah.
The air is heavy, the light is totally blinding, and there's this pervasive chemical smell that you just can't quite place.
Like a hospital smell, but worse.
Right, exactly. And for a second, your brain is just struggling to boot up, grasping at these fractured memories. You remember heat, you remember sand, you remember a blast.
Just visceral.
It is. And then you realize, wait, I survived. You survived a war, you survived a devastating injury. But as the fog of a 2-year coma begins to lift, you look around and realize that surviving the war was actually somehow the easy part.
Oh, absolutely. The easy part.
Because the real nightmare, the true battle for your sanity, is waiting for you not in a trench or a hospital ward, but right inside your own childhood bedroom.
It really shatters this pervasive cultural myth we have about recovery. I mean, we are so conditioned by movies and television to expect this triumphant awakening.
Right, the dramatic gasp of air.
Yes. The monitor beeps, the eyes flutter open, the family gathers around weeping tears of joy, and then you get the arduous but ultimately uplifting montage of healing.
Cue the inspirational music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the sources we are examining today, they dismantle that narrative completely. They force us to look unblinkingly at the profound, often grotesque collateral damage of survival.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you are joining us today because we are embarking on a journey that is going to be immersive, deeply analytical, and to be completely upfront with you, incredibly unsettling.
Buckle up, yeah.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the increasingly surreal and fragmented reality of Jason Matherson. He is attempting to return to a normal life. And please put the word normal in the biggest air quotes you can possibly imagine.
The biggest.
Because waking up is literally just the prologue to his psychological unraveling.
And to fully appreciate the magnitude of this unraveling, we really need to understand the environment he has been thrust into. Because this isn't some state-of-the-art rehabilitation facility equipped with teams of neurologists and psychiatrists managing his transition.
Far from it. Let's ground you, the listener, in exactly where we are in this story right now.
Good idea.
So, Jason Matherson was a soldier, catastrophically wounded in Iraq. He falls into a coma, and 2 years later he wakes up in a Denver hospital. But his stay there is remarkably short-lived.
Very short.
What unfolds next is a desperate, covert operation. His mother, Gloria, partners with a rogue hospital assistant named Willie. And together, they essentially smuggle Jason out of the facility.
The logistics of that alone, I mean, they speak volumes about Gloria's state of mind. She bypasses the entire United States Army medical oversight system.
Just totally goes rogue.
Totally. She relies on Willie to forge discharge papers, and they physically wheel a severely atrophied, newly conscious man out the front doors and shove him into the backseat of a blue sedan.
It's wild.
It is an act of sheer, terrifying desperation. It stems from a complete and total collapse of trust. I mean, she has absolutely zero faith in the hospital's lead physician, Dr. Wells, and she is willing to risk her son's physical safety just to regain control of his environment.
So they bring him home, but it's not a homecoming. There are no welcome back banners.
No balloons.
Right. Instead, they drive into a quiet Denver suburb and carry him into this haunting makeshift clinic. His parents have separated during his 2-year absence, so they place Jason in his departed father's old bedroom.
Which is heavy on its own.
Extremely. Picture this scene. You've got this dark-stained, heavy 1980s furniture, and standing right next to it, the cold, clinical gleam of a silver live stand. It's a total collision of domestic history and acute medical trauma.
That paints such a bleak picture.
And the defining moment of this transition happens when Jason finally gathers enough of his foggy senses to speak. The very first coherent realization he mutters to himself in that dark room isn't about his mother or the hospital or his injuries.
It's not.
It is a chilling confession. He just whispers, "I am a killer."
That phrase, And that is the anchor for his entire psychological state going forward.
Yes.
He isn't waking up as a blank slate. He is waking up carrying a massive internalized burden of guilt and violence.
Yeah.
His memory is still deeply fragmented, right? Meaning he doesn't have the context to process that guilt rationally. He just has the raw, unfiltered emotional weight of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the primary focus of our deep dive today is the terrifying intersection, where Jason's extreme physical fragility collides with his rapidly unspooling psychological state.
It's a train wreck in slow motion.
It really is. We are tracking a man who is about to take his medical care into his own hands, literally, by self-administering an experimental stolen drug called Barbicaine.
Which is never a good idea.
No! And the consequences for his grip on reality are going to be catastrophic.
So to navigate the sources we have today, you really need to keep this central framework in mind. Just consider the jarring contrast between the mundane, predictable safety of a suburban Denver neighborhood and the active, chaotic war zone that is playing out inside Jason's mind.
It's such a dichotomy.
Exactly.
Part 11. 4 days passed before Jason got up the nerve to give himself injections. He had been outside for the first time that day. The walk to the back fence was strenuous, and getting from point A to point B across a neglected lawn was like navigating a minefield. His mother was off playing cards with the girls for the first time since Jason came home. Jason went through the house to the living room and watched TV for a little while until he got bored and clicked it off. For a moment, he passed the time by looking at the walls and floor, realizing they haven't changed since he was young. A small telephone stand sat by his father's recliner. That was new. Next to the kitchen door, under the window, was a space heater. That was old. In the window was an old air conditioner with a poorly maintained seal around it. There was a dusty and frayed rug by the front door. The front door was scuffed up where everyone had pushed the door closed using the tips of their shoes. The two front windows were draped in thick fabric, tied back with mismatched cords. The walls in the room were faded yellow. Jason let this sink in. He was sitting in his mother's life. He was looking at her life held together with mismatched cords and dusty rugs. Dread washed over him as he took responsibility for this. Had he not been here, she might have been able to keep up on the chores. Who knows how much money she spent on the hospital care? Oh, God. Is that why she pulled me out of there and moved me into Dad's room? The doorbell rang. Jason rose and opened it without hesitating. He'd forgotten how he looked. It was Lucas Brooks. Without words, he handed Jason a wad of $1 bills. Jason asked, "What's this?" "For Miss McDonald. She sold my girlfriend a stroller. Is she home?" "She went downtown. She'll be back about noon." Lucas hesitated, but then spat out, "It's all there, you know. $30. Jason looked down at the cash and laughed. "I'm sure it is. Thank you. I'll be sure she gets this. Tell Miss McDonald I'll call her later." Lucas stepped off the porch, trying not to turn his back on Jason. Jason closed the door and thought, God, how bad do I look? He went upstairs for the first time since he was home and looked around his mother's room. It was surprisingly well kept for such a busy woman. The closet was standing open and it was obviously missing most of his father's clothes. Her bathroom was redecorated with very feminine framed art, lavender walls, and nice soaps and dishes. Under the sink, Jason looked for a razor, but there was nothing but extra rolls of tissue paper and a bottle of foot powder. Got to remind Mom to get some razors. He checked out his reflection and smirked again, thinking that Lucas must have been scared shitless. And then, behind Jason, he noticed his dress uniform hanging on the back of his mother's bedroom door, still wrapped in plastic. Part 12. Jason? The voice echoed in his mind. It sounded like someone calling him. Raisin? The voice called to him again. Mom, Jason muttered back to the voice. He was lying on his bed again, dressed in his uniform. The syringes were scattered everywhere. I see you gave yourself your first shot. She sounded proud, but he only heard, Pledo Navidor shelf your first spot. He laughed. He saw his mother there, and over the laughter of the walls, she told him about her wonderful day downtown. How her friends were so happy to get together. There was a kiss on his cheek, and he wiped his hand across it after his mother moved back. I see you found your old things, too. Kept them for you, son. Are you in there? Darblue and Dare? He heard. The house leaned to the left, and everyone was happy. Clenched in Jason's hand was $30, but his mother couldn't get it from him until later when he was fully asleep. She knew where it came from, and she knew she would have to explain to either Lucas or his mom about the strange man in her house. She glimpsed droplets of blood running down his wrist from the coat sleeve and staining the money. For a moment, she was frightened that he might have broken the PICC line, but then confirmed with her finger that the blood was dried and only appeared in that one spot. The fear left her as soon as she realized the money was clenched tightly in his left hand, the dead hand. She broke out in laughter. Jason's mind drifted into darkness. He reeled backward through his life, searching for meaning. He would only find torn ends in a clear image of Marley, just after they got to Iraq from Fort Hood. He saw a good friend. They bonded pretty quickly, but nothing. The memory was not there. He felt dread and loss because Marley was such an important friend. What happened? How much did you put in this? His mother was asking something. I told you. He rolled over to see her, but there was no one there by the time he got his body turned. Only a vague, blurry face stared down at him, laughing. He had come to life in Denver thinking about Marley, who he knew was dead. How do I know that? If Marley is dead, then why did I live? Marley? Jason was plunging deeper into the darkness. The phantom breath encircling him grew cold, and the laughter faded into a single voice. It was Marley, and he sounded alive. He sounded fine. Hey, buddy. Marley spoke. Jason's heart raced. Was this real? Can I speak to you? I have so much to ask about the accident. I need to know everything that happened. Jason's mom answered, I know. Then the darkness took Jason completely.
The physical conflict in Iraq ended for him 2 years ago, thousands of miles away. But the combat environment hasn't disappeared. It has simply relocated. It has mapped itself directly onto his living room, his hallways, and, the space behind his own eyes.
And we see that mapping happen almost immediately. And it starts in a place that should be entirely benign, which is the backyard.
Just a normal backyard.
Yeah. The sources detail Jason's very first attempt to step outside the house. It's been 4 days since that covert extraction from the hospital. His mother, Gloria, has finally decided to take a few hours for herself to go downtown and play cards with her friends.
Which she desperately needs.
For sure. But it means that for the very first time since he woke up, Jason is experiencing total isolation in this house. No nurses checking his vitals, no monitors beeping in the background, and no mother hovering over him. It's just him, the house, and the silence.
The psychological weight of that isolation, it really cannot be overstated. When a patient is in a highly regimented medical environment or constantly monitored by a hypervigilant caregiver like Gloria, their reality is constantly being defined and reinforced by external forces.
Someone's always telling you what to do.
Exactly. Someone is always telling them where they are, what time it is, what they should be feeling. The moment those external tethers are removed, the patient is left entirely to their own internal devices.
Right.
For someone with a healthy brain, a few hours alone is a relief. But for someone with profound brain trauma and acute PTSD, the sudden absence of those external anchors can cause reality to become incredibly fluid and dangerous.
And his reality shifts the actual moment he decides to open the back door. His goal is incredibly simple. He just wants to walk from the back porch to the fence line.
Just point A to point B.
Exactly. Point A to point B across a neglected suburban lawn. I was reading this section and thinking about the physical toll. It reminds me of footage of astronauts returning to Earth's gravity after months on the International Space Station.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. They've lost bone density, their muscles have atrophied. The simplest task, like just lifting a glass of water or standing up, requires this exhausting Herculean effort because the physical environment itself feels incredibly heavy and hostile to their weakened state.
Yeah, gravity is suddenly the enemy.
And Jason has been immobile in a bed for 2 years, so the physical exertion is massive. But the text doesn't just describe the walk as tiring. It uses a very specific, jarring phrase. It says that getting across this overgrown grass was like navigating a minefield.
That phrase.
When I read that, it stopped me in my tracks. The text literally calls the lawn a minefield. At first I thought, okay, maybe that's just a colorful way to say he's physically exhausted or that the ground is just uneven. But is there something more going on here neurologically?
Oh, there is absolutely something more going on. The choice of the word minefield is a massive indicator of his neurological state.
Okay, tell me more.
While the physical weakness, the muscle atrophy and the monoplegia paralyzing his left arm, while that makes the walk difficult, the term minefield reveals that his brain is actively misinterpreting sensory data.
Misinterpreting it how?
Well, this is the hallmark of severe post-traumatic stress. The amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and threat detection, has been fundamentally altered by his time in combat. It has become hypersensitized.
So the visual input of the backyard is basically bypassing the logical part of his brain completely?
Precisely. It's the exact opposite of normal cognitive function. In a healthy brain, you see overgrown grass. Your visual cortex sends that data to the prefrontal cortex, which applies logic. It says, the grass is long, I might trip, I should step carefully.
Right, a normal reaction.
Right. But in Jason's brain, the sensory input of uneven terrain and unkempt vegetation bypasses that logical filtering entirely and triggers an immediate survival-level alarm in the amygdala.
Wow.
His central nervous system is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. His body isn't reacting to a poorly maintained lawn in Denver. It is reacting to the threat of improvised explosive devices in a combat zone.
That is terrifying.
He is carefully placing his boots, not to avoid a divot in the dirt, but to avoid being blown apart. He is experiencing a real-time waking flashback where the geography of his trauma has overlaid itself onto his physical surroundings.
That reframes the entire sequence for me. I mean, he survives the trauma of the battlefield. He survives the 2-year void of a coma. He successfully makes it all the way back to the supposed sanctuary of his childhood backyard. And the tragic irony is that he is still actively deployed.
He never left.
The war literally followed him home and rewired his spatial processing. So he makes this agonizing trek to the fence and back. And the sheer physiological tax of the hypervigilance, combined with his muscular atrophy, leaves him completely drained.
Naturally.
He retreats back indoors, seeking some kind of shelter from his own mind.
Retreating indoors is an attempt to lower the cognitive load. He turns on the television, which is a classic avoidance technique.
Oh, for sure.
The constant noise and flashing images of a TV, they demand just enough attention to distract the brain from its own internal threat assessments, but not enough attention to be exhausting. It's electronic numbing.
But the numbing doesn't work for long. He gets bored, or maybe the noise just becomes too much and he clicks the TV off. And the moment the screen goes black, the silence of the house rushes in to fill the void.
The silence is deafening.
It really is. This scene is written so quietly, but the implications are huge. With the distraction of the television gone, Jason truly looks at the interior of his home for the first time since he was a young man. The text provides this meticulous, almost agonizing inventory of the space around him. We are essentially riding along his optic nerve as he scans the living room.
The author is using the physical objects in the room to map out the passage of time and really the emotional decay of the family unit.
Yeah, he starts with the furniture. He notices a small telephone stand positioned right next to his father's recliner. The stand itself looks relatively new, but the recliner it sits next to is completely empty.
A glaring absence.
It's a stark, undeniable visual confirmation of the fact that his parents separated while he was lost in the coma. Then he sees an old, cheap space heater tucked under the kitchen window.
Which suggests the central heating either doesn't work or they can't afford to run it.
Exactly. He looks down at the rug by the front door, noting that it is thick with dust and deeply frayed at the edges.
Notice how his gaze moves from the center of the room toward the boundaries, like the points of entry and exit.
Yes. He looks at the front door itself. He observes that the bottom of the door is heavily scuffed and marked up. And he deduces that this is because people, mostly his mother, have been kicking it shut or pushing it closed with the tips of their shoes.
Because their hands were too full of groceries or medical supplies to grab the knob.
Right. And he glances at the front windows, which are draped in this thick, heavy fabric to keep the light out. But the fabric is tied back with mismatched cords. It looks haphazard. It looks desperate. And finally, his eyes settle on the walls of the room, taking in the faded yellow paint.
Now, if you approach this text superficially, you might argue that Jason is just orienting himself. He's been gone for years, he's finally awake, so naturally he's going to notice the changes in the decor and the general wear and tear of the house.
So what does this all mean? Because I have to push back hard against any interpretation that this is just casual observation of interior design.
Oh, I agree completely.
When I read this, I don't see a guy checking out the paint job. I see a devastating moment of psychological accounting. This is an inventory of collateral damage.
The context of his recent discoveries makes the casual observation theory impossible to support. You have to layer this visual inventory over the facts he has absorbed since waking up. He knows the father figure is gone.
Yeah.
He knows his mother, Gloria, has spent the last 2 years holding a vigil by a hospital bed, effectively pausing her entire existence to watch him not die.
The internal monologue the text gives us here is absolutely crushing. As he stares at the faded yellow walls and the scuffed door, the reality of his situation crystallizes. He explicitly realizes that he is sitting in the dead center of his mother's crumbling life.
It's tragic.
He looks at those curtains and thinks, I am looking at her life held together with mismatched cords. That phrase is brilliant. It isn't about window treatments. It is a profound metaphor for Gloria holding her sanity, her finances, and her household together with whatever frayed scraps of energy she has left.
It perfectly captures the concept of caregiver burnout, but viewed through the horrifying lens of the burden himself.
Wow.
As his cognitive functions improve, the capacity for complex emotion returns. And the very first complex emotion to fully boot up is crushing guilt. He starts running the terrifying arithmetic that families of patients requiring long-term care are forced to do.
The math no one wants to do.
Right. But instead of calculating how to survive, he is calculating how much his survival has cost her.
He looks at the dust and the decay and wonders, if I had just died over there, or if I hadn't been taking up all her time in the hospital, she might have been able to maintain this house. She might have had a normal life.
He's taking all the blame.
He questions the financial devastation, how much money was completely vaporized by 2 years of intensive care, and then his mind goes to the darkest possible place. He questions the very nature of his covert extraction from the hospital.
This part is so dark.
He asks himself, did she pull me out of Columbia Hospital and hide me in this makeshift bedroom clinic because she felt the doctors were incompetent? Or did she do it because she simply ran out of money? Did my existence bankrupt her to the point where she had to steal me away just to keep a roof over our heads?
The tragedy of neurological recovery is on full display here. Ignorance, while he was in the coma, provided a protective barrier. He felt no pain, no guilt, no burden.
Ignorance is bliss.
Exactly. As the brain heals enough to process the environment, the immediate reward for that healing is this acute, agonizing realization of the destruction his continued heartbeat has caused. The text states that a profound dread washes over him. This isn't a fleeting thought of sadness. It is a somatic experience. The guilt is a physical weight pressing down on him in that recliner.
And just as that suffocating dread peaks, the outside world decides to violently puncture the silence of the house.
Perfect timing, right?
The doorbell rings. Now, Jason is swirling in this vortex of guilt and trauma. He is so completely absorbed in the emotional reality of the house that he completely forgets his own physical reality. Without thinking, he just stands up, walks to the front door, and pulls it open.
Big mistake.
Standing on the porch is a neighbor, a man named Lucas Brooks.
The collision of these two characters creates an intensely uncomfortable sociological dynamic. Lucas Brooks is walking up to this house expecting a mundane interaction with Gloria, an older woman in the neighborhood.
Just a normal suburban chat.
Right. Instead, the door swings open to reveal Jason. You have to visualize what Lucas is seeing here. A man who was incredibly gaunt from years of intravenous feeding, moving with the jerky, awkward gait of someone suffering from severe muscle atrophy.
Yeah.
His left arm hangs entirely useless, paralyzed by the monoplegia. His face is unshaven. His eyes are likely sunken and haunted by the trauma he was just reliving in the backyard.
The sources describe the transaction that follows in a way that is incredibly grim, but it's laced with this dark, almost nauseating humor. We don't just hear that Lucas is scared. The text shows us the visceral mechanics of his terror.
Oh, he's terrified.
Lucas is visibly shaking. He is stuttering so badly he can barely form a coherent sentence. He refuses to make eye contact with Jason, staring at the ground or off to the side. He is standing there, physically recoiling, holding out a crumpled wad of $1 bills.
That's so awkward.
He finally manages to stammer out the purpose of his visit. He explains that his girlfriend recently bought a baby stroller from Jason's mom. And the sources describe the stroller sitting in the yard. It is a beat-up, rusted piece of absolute junk that looks like it was dragged out of a dumpster.
Just junk.
Lucas thrusts the wad of cash forward and stammers, "It's all there, you know. $30.
30 crumbled $1 bills in exchange for discarded rusted metal. It is the physical manifestation of the exact financial desperation Jason was agonizing over just moments before the doorbell rang.
It confirms his darkest fears.
Yes. His mother isn't just struggling. She has been reduced to hawking garbage from the front lawn just to scrape together $30 in loose change.
Jason looks down at this pathetic, tragic little stack of cash, and a laugh escapes him. But it's not a laugh of amusement. It is a hollow, bitter, cynical sound. He takes the money and tells Lucas he'll make sure his mom gets it.
And then Lucas's reaction.
And then the physical comedy of Lucas's fear reaches its peak. Lucas is so desperate to get away, but he is fundamentally terrified of turning his back on Jason. So he literally backs down the porch steps.
Like slowly retreating from a bear.
Exactly. He retreats backward toward his own property, eyes wide, treating Jason like a volatile, unpredictable predator that might strike if he breaks visual contact. Jason finally closes the door on him, and the absolute reality of Lucas's terror forces a devastating realization.
The mirror is held up.
All the thoughts of the house and the money vanish, replaced by a single horrifying question. Jason stands in the hallway and thinks, God, how bad do I look?
Up until the moment he opened that door, Jason's entire post-coma existence had been moderated by two people. Willie, who views him with the clinical detachment of a medical professional, and Gloria, who views him through the desperate, fiercely protective, and highly subjective lens of a mother.
They're his whole world.
Right. So Lucas Brooks is the very first objective observer Jason has encountered. Lucas acts as a mirror reflecting the unvarnished reality of society's perception. And that reflection is pure, instinctual horror.
It's harsh.
The neighbor's reaction violently shatters any lingering illusion Jason might have harbored about his ability to quietly slip back into civilian life and just be normal again.
But the true horror of the Lucas Brooks encounter doesn't actually sink in until a few hours later. There is a crucial, deeply unsettling detail in the sources regarding the aftermath of this transaction.
This part is so strange.
So the exhaustion and the emotional spike of the encounter take their toll, and Jason eventually passes out. He falls asleep downstairs. When Gloria finally returns from her card game downtown, she walks into the house and finds him unconscious.
Okay.
As she checks on him, she discovers the $30 from Lucas. But the money isn't sitting on a table. It isn't in Jason's pocket. It is clenched tightly in his hand. But here is the terrifying detail. The money is gripped in his left hand.
The paralyzed hand.
The hand that is completely paralyzed by monoplegia. The hand that hasn't moved voluntarily in 2 years. The dead hand is holding the cash in an iron grip.
The physiology of this moment is fascinating, but it's Gloria's psychological reaction that truly demands analysis.
Tell me about it.
To understand her response, you have to understand the extreme baseline of stress she operates under. When she first leans in and sees the money clutched in that hand, she notices something else. There are droplets of dark, dried blood running down his wrist from beneath his coat sleeve, staining the edges of the $1 bills.
Her reaction is instantaneous panic. She sees the blood, and her mind immediately leaps to the most catastrophic medical scenario.
Of course it does.
She knows that Jason has a peripherally inserted central catheter, a PICC line, threaded into the vein in that arm. This line is his lifeline. It's how they administer the heavy medications. She is struck by the terrifying thought that while she was gone, he somehow thrashed around or fell and ripped the PICC line out.
which could lead to massive hemorrhage or immediate life-threatening sepsis.
So her training kicks in. She investigates the source of the blood, gently using her finger to trace it back up his arm. She confirms that the bleeding is localized, dried, and that the PICC line itself is perfectly secure.
Okay, crisis averted.
The acute life-or-death crisis is averted. The rush of relief she feels in that moment creates a massive emotional swing, and it's in the downward trajectory of that swing that she finally processes the second piece of visual data. The money is locked in the paralyzed hand. It isn't just draped over his fingers. It is clenched with a violent, vice-like tension.
Now, if an average person walked into a dimly lit room and saw a comatose man's completely paralyzed, neurologically dead hand suddenly exhibiting an unnatural iron grip around a stack of blood-stained cash,
Yeah.
they would run out of the house screaming.
I would.
It is macabre. It defies logic. It looks like a possession. It's a moment that should provoke profound unease. But how does Gloria react?
How does she react?
What's fascinating here is that the unease never registers. Her initial terror regarding the PICC line entirely evaporates, and she throws her head back and breaks into genuine laughter.
It's so jarring. The text says she just laughs at the sight of it.
She just laughs. It perfectly illustrates the depths of the absurdity and the psychological distortion of her daily reality. Think about the neurology of what is actually happening. Jason isn't miraculously healed.
No.
The brain isn't sending a conscious, voluntary signal to grip the money. This is likely a severe spastic reflex. The spinal cord is contracting the muscles violently because it is no longer receiving the proper inhibitory signals from the damaged brain.
So it's just a misfire.
It is a symptom of severe neurological dysfunction. But Gloria has lived in the darkest trenches of trauma for so long that she has completely recalibrated her definition of a miracle. To her, any movement, even a macabre, involuntary spasm clutching bloody cash, is a victory. She doesn't see a horrifying medical anomaly. She sees progress. She finds hope in a moment of pure grotesquerie.
That's wow.
It demonstrates that trauma hasn't just warped Jason's perspective of reality. It has fundamentally warped hers as well.
The environment they are sharing is deeply toxic to both of them. So Jason eventually wakes up from the sleep. He realizes his mother is home, but the encounter with Lucas is still burning a hole in his mind.
You can't shake it.
The memory of the neighbor backing away from him like a monster is obsessive. This drives Jason to do something he has entirely avoided since he was smuggled into the house. He decides to venture upstairs. He goes on a physical expedition to find a mirror so he can finally confront his own ruined appearance.
The architecture of the house serves as a powerful narrative device here.
That's-
Well, the ground floor, specifically his father's old room with the AV stand, represents his current reality. The trauma, the medical fragility, the immediate aftermath of the coma. The upstairs represents the history of the family, the private spaces where life occurred before the war shattered everything.
Like a time capsule.
Exactly. Venturing up those stairs is a significant psychological threshold crossing. He is leaving the safety of the makeshift hospital ward and entering the museum of his family's past.
He makes his way to the top of the stairs and walks into his mother's bedroom, and he immediately starts cataloging the environment again, just like he did in the living room. But the tone here is different.
Very different.
He notices the room is surprisingly neat and well-kept, in stark contrast to the frayed edges downstairs. He sees the master closet door standing wide open. He looks inside, and the unspoken reality of his parents' separation hits him with physical force. Half the closet is empty.
Because his dad is gone.
Most of his father's clothes are entirely gone. It is a massive visual confirmation of the void his father left behind. Then he moves to the ensuite bathroom, searching for the mirror. The bathroom has been completely overhauled. It is intensely feminine.
Right?
The walls are painted a soft lavender. There are decorative soaps, framed art on the walls. He bends down and looks in the cabinet under the sink, hoping to find an old razor to scrape the heavy scruff off his face.
But he doesn't find one.
No. The cabinet holds nothing but tissue paper, foot powder, and feminine products. There is not a single men's razor. The space is entirely devoid of masculine artifacts.
The environment has organically adapted to the absence of men. First, his father vacated the space, and he himself has been absent for years.
Right.
The house, particularly this upstairs sanctuary, has healed over the wound of their departure by completely reshaping itself around Gloria's new, solitary existence.
Okay.
The masculine presence hasn't just faded. It has been systematically scrubbed away and replaced.
I picture him standing in that lavender bathroom like an archaeologist who has just dusted off a tomb, only to realize that the civilization he is studying moved on centuries ago.
That's a great way to put it.
He is uncovering the artifacts of a life that learned to survive without him. It's a profound realization of his own irrelevance. He is essentially a ghost haunting a family structure that was forced to completely reconfigure itself to survive his absence.
He is an artifact completely out of time in his own home. He belongs to the era before the coma, but the house is living in the present.
Yeah.
And it's within this space of entirely erased masculine identity that he finally raises his eyes and looks into the bathroom mirror. He forces himself to see what Lucas Brooks saw. The unkempt, overgrown hair, the gaunt, hollowed-out face, the eyes that look like they've seen the end of the world.
It's confronting.
He looks at this ruined visage and he actually smirks. A kind of dark acknowledgement of why Lucas was so terrified. But the smirk dies on his lips almost instantly because his eyes adjust to the reflection and he sees what is hanging on the wall directly behind him.
This is the moment the identity crisis fully detonates. He is looking in the mirror, but his focus shifts over his own shoulder, catching the reflection of his mother's bedroom door behind him. Hanging on the back of that door is his United States Army dress uniform.
His uniform.
It is pristine, and it is still perfectly wrapped in the clear plastic from the dry cleaners.
The visual composition the author creates here is devastating. Think about the stark contrast presented in that single pane of glass.
Okay.
In the foreground, you have the immediate visceral reality. A physically broken, scruffy, heavily impaired man who is dependent on intravenous drugs and who just scared a civilian neighbor half to death.
Yeah.
But hovering right behind him, preserved in pristine, suffocating plastic, is the idealized, immortalized image of the past. It is the perfect, honorable, squared-away soldier.
It is quite literally a face-off. It's a confrontation between who he believed he was and the broken remnants the war has reduced him to. And the fact that his mother has kept this uniform wrapped in plastic, hanging on the back of her bedroom door like a religious shrine. It reveals so much about Gloria.
It really does.
It shows that she is clinging to the memory of the flawless, uninjured soldier just as fiercely as Jason is alienated by it. He turns away from the mirror and walks back into the bedroom to look at the uniform directly. He stares at the crisp name tag pinned to the chest. Matherson.
And he doesn't recognize it.
No. The text makes a point to note that there is absolutely no recognition in his eyes. He reaches out with his good hand and touches the stiff fabric through the plastic. His mother hears him moving around and comes up the stairs. She walks into the room, and Jason turns to her, pointing at the uniform, and asks a question that breaks your heart.
Such a sad question.
He asks, "Am I in the Army?"
The uniform no longer represents an occupation. It represents an identity that has been entirely hollowed out by trauma. He recognizes the sequence of letters in the name Matherson, but he feels absolutely zero connection to the institution of the military or to the specific man who once proudly wore that fabric.
He's a stranger to himself.
The uniform demands that he reconcile two completely incompatible versions of himself, the hero on the door and the ghost in the mirror. And it is a psychological reconciliation that he is entirely, fundamentally unequipped to handle in his fragile state.
And when a human being is faced with a psychological crisis of that magnitude and they lack the cognitive tools to process it, what do they instinctively do?
They run.
They look for an exit. They look for an escape hatch. Which brings us to Jason's transition back downstairs. He is completely overwhelmed. The guilt of the house's decay, the terror in Lucas Brooks's eyes, the erasure of his father in the bathroom, and the phantom of his own past hanging on the bedroom door. It is all too much.
Too much input.
He retreats down the stairs to the dark sanctuary of his father's old room. And he finally works up the nerve to do something he has been putting off since he arrived. He prepares to give himself his first self-injection of his medication, the stolen drug, Barbicaine.
This is a crucial pivot point in his recovery narrative. Up until this moment, either Willie or his mother had been administering the medication through his PIICC line.
Right, passively.
Taking control of the syringe himself is a massive, dark milestone. It signifies a shift from passive patient to active participant. He is no longer just receiving medical care, he is actively seeking out chemical oblivion.
Wow.
He has identified the drug as the only viable escape route from the crushing weight of his newly regained consciousness.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources don't just tell us he took the drug. They provide a terrifying, first-hand experiential breakdown of what the Barbicaine actually does to the neural pathways of his brain.
It's not
It is not a slow drift into sleep. It is an immediate, violent fragmentation of reality. It begins with his hearing. Auditory hallucinations set in instantly. The internal voice in his head, his own internal monologue, echoes his name Jason. But as the chemical hits his brainstem, the sound distorts. The consonants warp, and the voice begins calling him Raisin.
The substitution of the word raisin for Jason is deeply symbolic, but also neurologically terrifying.
Raisin.
Right. Symbolically, a raisin is a dried, shriveled, depleted version of a grape. It perfectly mirrors how he views his own physical and mental state, a withered husk of his former self.
Oh, that makes sense.
But neurologically, it marks the exact moment the drug begins to short-circuit his brain's semantic processing centers. The language center of his brain is losing the ability to attach the correct meaning to phonetic sounds.
And that neurological breakdown accelerates incredibly fast. Right after he pushes the plunger on the syringe, his mother walks into the room. She sees the medical supplies scattered on the bedside table. She looks at him and she speaks.
She's proud of him.
The text indicates that her tone is warm and proud. She is saying something encouraging, acknowledging that he finally gave himself his first shot. It is the comforting, grounding, maternal voice of reason. But that is absolutely not what Jason's brain receives.
Not all.
The concept of language completely and utterly dissolves in his ears. He doesn't hear a muffled voice or a foreign language. He hears absolute chaotic gibberish. The sources provide the exact phonetic nonsense his brain registers. He hears her say, "Pledo knave door shelf you first spot."
It's total nonsense.
He looks at her, confused, and she asks him a follow-up question, but all he hears is a single bizarre word, plitoise.
What the text is describing with frightening clinical accuracy is a profound, drug-induced Wernicke's aphasia.
Wait, the Wernicke's aphasia, right?
Yes, also known as receptive aphasia. It is a condition often caused by lesions or damage to the posterior superior temporal gyrus. In Jason's case, the barbicaine is chemically inducing this block. His auditory cortex can still physically hear the frequencies and sounds of his mother's voice, but the cognitive bridge that translates those auditory signals into semantic meaning has been completely demolished.
That is horrifying.
It is one of the most horrifying neurological states a person can experience because you remain fully conscious while the fundamental tool of human connection, which is language, is stripped away. The one tether he had left to reality, the comforting sound of his mother, is scrambled into alien noise. He is trapped behind the glass of his own mind, functionally locked in.
And the terror doesn't stop at his ears. The auditory collapse is immediately followed by massive visual distortions. The text paints this incredibly vivid, almost psychedelic funhouse mirror picture. The physical geometry of the bedroom begins to warp.
Everything shifts.
Jason perceives the entire house physically tilting and leaning heavily to the left. The walls themselves begin to ripple, and then, terrifyingly, the walls start laughing at him.
Laughing walls.
And amidst this total collapse of sensory reality, Jason is suddenly overcome by an unnatural, surging chemical happiness. The dread and the guilt are vaporized, and he starts laughing hysterically right along with the walls.
The barbicaine is executing its primary function flawlessly. It is eradicating his pain and his trauma. But the cost of that eradication is total cognitive obliteration. The drug is fracturing his grip on reality.
Yeah.
It is taking the profound guilt of his mother's ruined life, the traumatic memory of Lucas's terror, and the crushing weight of the plastic-wrapped uniform, and replacing all of it with a synthetic, laughing delirium.
It's artificial.
It forces the reader to confront a deeply unsettling question about modern medicine and trauma. When the treatment dissolves the very concepts of sound, meaning, and spatial physics into a drug-induced euphoria, is that actually recovery? Or is it simply replacing a physiological coma with a pharmacological one?
It is absolutely a waking coma. He has traded the silent, empty darkness of the hospital bed for a loud, hallucinating, chaotic darkness. And the ultimate tragedy of chemical escape is that the high is never permanent.
What goes up must come down.
The euphoria is inherently synthetic, and synthetic structures always break down. Which brings us to the inevitable come-down. As the barbicaine begins to metabolize and the chemical happiness fades, Jason doesn't gently float back to baseline reality. Instead, his mind plunges into a suffocating, terrifying darkness.
The neurological pendulum swings back with devastating momentum. The higher the synthetic peak induced by the drug, the deeper and more treacherous the psychological trough that follows. As the dopamine and serotonin receptors are depleted, the brain desperately grasps for structure in the void.
The sources describe this come down as Jason reeling backward through his own life. He's desperately searching his corrupted memory banks for some kind of meaning, some kind of emotional anchor to hold on to as the drug leaves his system.
But there isn't much left.
But the trauma has shredded his filing system. The text says he finds nothing but torn ends, just fragmented, useless bits of static and flashes of pain. He searches and searches until finally his mind lands on one crystal clear, uncorrupted image.
And who is it?
It is an image of his good friend, a fellow soldier named Marley Wilkes. The memory is specifically from right after they arrived in Iraq, fresh off the plane from Fort Hood.
The sudden clarity of Marley Wilkes emerging from the static is crucial. Marley represents the absolute emotional core of Jason's trauma.
His best friend.
In the crucible of a combat deployment, the bonds formed between soldiers often supersede familial ties. Marley is the brotherhood, the shared sacrifice, the only person who truly understood the reality of the war. But accessing this specific memory in his current, chemically depleted state is incredibly dangerous.
Because even though his mind is foggy, Jason's internal logic finally catches up to the reality of his situation. He's lying in a dark bedroom in Denver, slowly coming back to life. He's thinking about his vibrant friend Marley, and then the horrible truth asserts itself.
He remembers.
He knows intrinsically, deep in his bones, that Marley is dead. Marley didn't make it back. And that realization forces Jason to confront a haunting, unavoidable question. It is the ultimate paralyzing question of survivor's guilt. Jason stares into the dark and asks himself, if Marley is dead, then why did I live?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of combat psychology, survivor's guilt is frequently the most intractable, destructive symptom of severe trauma. It defies all logic. It demands a cosmic accounting, a universal fairness that simply does not exist in war.
It's just random.
Jason is desperately looking for a reason, a moral justification for his own continued breathing when a man he loved as a brother perished in the sand. And when a fractured, drug-addled mind demands an answer and cannot find a rational one, it inevitably provides a supernatural one.
The psychological darkness of his guilt suddenly begins to manifest physically in the bedroom. The chaotic, drug-induced laughter of the walls that we heard earlier, it fades away completely. The room goes dead silent.
The silence is back.
And then a phantom breath encircles Jason in the bed. The text says the air in the room suddenly grows freezing cold. And out of that freezing silence, a single, terrifyingly lucid voice speaks.
The transition the author makes here is brilliant, moving from the loud, chaotic noise of the Barbicane hallucination to the sharp, cold, absolute clarity of this single voice. Signals to the reader that this is different.
It's not just the drugs anymore.
This isn't just another random misfiring of synapses caused by the drug. This is something much deeper. This is the foundational core of his trauma, breaking through the final barrier of his consciousness.
The voice belongs to Marley. But here is the true climax of the terror in this segment. He doesn't sound like a ghost. He doesn't sound like an ethereal memory echoing from the past or a booming, distorted hallucination.
No, he doesn't.
He sounds perfectly, completely alive. He sounds fine. And he whispers a chilling, casual greeting.
Hey, buddy. The sheer colloquial casualness of that greeting is what makes the moment so deeply, fundamentally unsettling. The monster waiting for Jason in the dark isn't a demon with horns. It isn't a shadowy figure of the enemy.
It's his buddy.
It is the friendly, familiar voice of his dead best friend. It violently shatters the barrier between the living and the dead. It suggests that Marley isn't just a passive memory to be recalled. He is an active participant in Jason's current reality. The trauma of the past hasn't stayed in the past. It has crossed over, walked into his childhood home, and pulled up a chair right next to his bed.
It is the ultimate intrusion. You can lock the front door against the terrifying pity of neighbors like Lucas Brooks. You can close the closet door to hide the ghosts of your former self hanging in plastic. But you cannot lock out the ghosts that you carry inside your own head.
You can't escape your own mind.
Especially when you have just systematically blown the doors off your own consciousness with stolen hospital narcotics.
The tragic irony of the Barbicane is fully realized here. The drug was supposed to keep the trauma at bay. Instead, it merely dissolved the cognitive firewalls that were keeping the trauma quarantined. It opened the gates.
So where does this leave us? For you listening right now, I want you to really consider the incredibly fine, fragile line between physical healing and psychological breaking. In this story, we watch Jason's paralyzed arm involuntarily twitch with life as it grips the cash. We see him summon the immense physical strength to take steps across a neglected yard. His body is desperately trying to survive.
by his mind.
But simultaneously, his mind is crumbling into absolute dust. It makes you wonder about our own mechanisms for coping. When we try to numb or medicate our deepest pain, whether it's with actual powerful pharmaceuticals or through distraction, avoidance, or isolation, do we sometimes just dissolve our own defenses? Do we open a back door for our ghosts to walk right through and sit beside us?
It is a profound dilemma that extends far beyond this specific narrative. We are incredibly adept at treating the physical body because a broken bone or a severed line is tangible. You can see it. You can stitch it.
Right.
But the mind requires a completely different calculus, one where the cure can sometimes be the very thing that unleashes the disease.
It leaves us with a chilling question that we certainly haven't fully answered today. I want you to ponder this as we sign off. Are the extreme experimental medications keeping Jason Matherson alive actually repairing the broken circuitry of his brain? Or are they slowly, chemically rebuilding the trauma, reconstructing the war, and resurrecting the dead people he left behind in the sands of Iraq, right here in the quiet suburbs of Denver?
Are you prepared to face the details of the accident and the ghosts of Iraq?
I'm ready.
This is Troy. I wanted to thank you for listening and hope that you tune in for my weekly presentation of In Darkness We Sleep. Vocals by Eric Neubauer and Troy St. James. Music and episode art provided by Robert McNichol. I can be contacted directly at troystjames@cox.net. This audio podcast is produced by Troy St. James, copyright 2012. Have a good night.